All right, me. It is the end of February. It's 27th, I think. And today, while substituting for a biology class, I finished reading Tennessee Williams' The Glass Menagerie. I mean, this really took me about an hour and a half to read through. It is a one-act play. It is only 7 scenes. So it's this very, very quick piece. Certainly, I think I read this when I was in 10th grade, I think. I feel it's a very popular book for schools and for reading because of how short it is. There is a lot packed into a very short amount of time, but it's certainly not this, massive in-depth look into a lot of things, right? You're also only looking at 4 characters, right? Which, 4, 5, technically, characters that are in this play. So it's also a very, very easy one to look at in a lot of ways, right? But yeah. So the Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams is really kind of this collection of hopes, dreams, and not letting go of certain things, right? So you have your 3 main characters that are in all of our scenes, which is Amanda, Laura, and Tom. Amanda is the matriarch, was at one point married to a guy, I don't remember the guy's name, but he was a telephone operator or worked on telephone lines, and then eventually ran away from the house at one point. Right, yeah, they didn't even make note of, at least in the characters, what the guy's name is. But what's also very interesting is that, the Glass Menagerie takes place in St. Louis. You don't actually know it takes place in St. Louis until like the very end, I think, in which they begin mentioning the St. Louis Zoo, and like Tom's desire to run away. This is important because you have Amanda, who is very much this Southern belle that exists, or at least that's what she constantly frames herself as, right? Whether that is the truth or not, that's called into question, because Amanda is obsessed with the way that things used to be, right? In which she had, according to her, 1 million gentlemen callers that were all interested in her, and then she got to choose. And now how much that is actually the truth is very questionable, right? But there's this obsession with the way that things used to be. And she forces that onto Laura, her daughter, who is 23, 24. And Laura is kind of this manifestation of like, what does it mean to feel that you are trapped in certain ways, right? Of where, because her mother has put on this guise of, well, we need to be perfect, we need to look at certain things in a certain way, we need to do things in a certain way. Laura feels that she's trapped because she can never be those things, right? Laura has some sort of physical ailment. It's not, fully discussed at any point, but she has some sort of brace on her leg that she's always had. And because of this, at a young age, she felt that she was isolated and alone, and then that has carried forward into all of her daily life, in which she has almost no ability to interact with people, right? And in a world in which women are not allowed to choose what they do, right? And that women are forced into very, very small, very, very specific roles. And almost all of those roles being heavily socialized positions, right? Is that there is not truly a place for Laura to be by herself and live in her own world, right? Instead, she has to become someone that she is not, or rely on the goodness of other people to support her, right? Which becomes a small plot point, but that's that. And then finally you have Tom, and Tom is 21-ish. It says that he's 2 years younger than Laura at one point. But Tom is a poet at heart. He is someone that wants to be writing. He's someone that wants to be adventuring, but cannot, right? Instead, he works at a warehouse for $65 a month to pay for the family to get everything, right? And he has this intense longing that goes over every single thing, of where it's this longing for adventure, it's this longing for independence, it's this longing for doing what he wants to do with himself, right? And the only difference between him and Laura is that he gets to act on those things, right? Because of the position that he is in, not by anyone's choice, right? But just because he is a man in this society, right? And he eventually gets to act on his decision in the same way that his father did, right? Of where his father left, he leaves as well. And the women are just kind of forced to pick up the pieces and figure out something, a new way to live, right? That is horrendous in a lot of ways, right? Because they are not given the same opportunities. They do not have the same opportunities. The final named character is Jim, who is a gentleman caller. Goes back into this whole theme of focus on the past and the way that things used to be. What we learn is that Jim was actually Laura's high school crush that she had. And Jim was this guy who just did it all when he was in high school and was in charge of everything and was, supposed to be this great, fantastic person that no one could ever stop. And then things just didn't pan out once he left high school. And so he works at the same warehouse that Tom does. And as Tom describes at one point, the friendship between them isn't because they're actually really friends, but it's because Jim needs someone who remembers what he used to be like, and Tom is that person, right? Of where Tom gets to, or Tom is the person that can remember Jim as this hero, right? And then when they finally meet throughout this whole thing, what initially then also ends up drawing Jim to Laura is because, right, of the same thing of where Laura still idolizes him in so many ways, right? Of initially, right, it's described as like, oh, this was the first guy that I really liked, and that's kind of it. But then as Laura and Jim interact, Laura really shows that she has had this kind of almost fanatical obsession with him, of just knowing everything about his life, except for the fact that he ended up not being married, right? He supposedly got engaged at one point, but did not marry. And it is just, right, Jim is infatuated with this concept, this idea of being around someone who is just so in love with what he used to be, right, and can remember what it used to be in glory, much like Amanda is. As it turns out, Jim actually has a girlfriend already that he is going steady with, and leaves the house, and leaves the family. Tom then also leaves the family very shortly afterwards. We end up with this thing of where during this date, this dinner, of where Jim has been invited over to the house, Tom reveals to Jim that he has spent money that was supposed to go towards the light bill into paying the dues to become a U.S. merchant marine. And then in the middle of the date, the lights go out, right? So they finish the play by candlelight. And it just becomes one of those things of where it is this obsession with trying to become, right, what is the obsession of who we can be versus who we have to be, right? Which is a very, very common issue with so many things, of where it is this, I won't say forced, but it is this conundrum that we exist in, right? Of where we constantly tell our children, and we constantly tell the world around us, of yes, we would like you to be whoever you want to be. We would like you to explore your options. We'd like you to do what you want to do what makes you happy. At the same time, though, right, we are also forced into this issue of, because of the way that our lives are structured and lives are set up and the world around us is set up, of where we must also ask them to not follow their dreams, but instead do things that are practical to support the people around them, right? It's the Thomas Jefferson of it all, not Thomas Jefferson, John Adams of it all, of the, my father studied, I study war and politics so that my children can study math and science, so that their children can study art, right? And, it's this very, very tough burden to exist upon, of where we must do things that we don't want to, not because it's good for us, but it's good for people that we have not met yet, right? So yeah, lots of stuff. The Glass Menagerie itself is this collection of glass that Laura has, Laura being in her own world for the vast majority of the time, forcibly separating herself from things. She in herself becomes almost like one of these glass toys that she has, or glass figures that she has, in which she is in effect something to be looked at but not touched, right? And the whole thing in capitalism, and about what is the usefulness of a person, what is the usefulness of things, and it's that Laura herself is not inherently useful, right? But she's still a person. She still has a right to exist, right? And so how do we combat those things, and how do we make those things work with each other? I think that's it. I think that's it for the Glass Menagerie. Yeah.